The sliding glass doors parted with a rush of cold air and antiseptic, and she stumbled through, clutching the leash of the dog at her side. The fluorescent lights washed her face pale, her hair stuck in wet strands to her cheeks, her shoes squeaking on the linoleum as she pulled the animal with her. The German shepherd limped badly, blood matting its fur along the hind leg, but its eyes never left hers, its body pressed close against her thigh with every step. She was trembling, whether from fear, exhaustion, or both, she couldn't tell. The emergency department was packed, voices buzzing, monitors beeping, the smell of disinfectant battling faint traces of blood and sweat, but all of it blurred around her as she reached the front desk and leaned against the counter. The clerk started to ask something, then stopped when she noticed the blood on both of them. The girl's sleeve torn, skin scraped raw, the dog's limp worsening, drops of red staining the white tile. The clerk's eyes widened, then she hit a button for security and flagged down a nurse. The girl tried to speak, but her voice cracked, so she pointed down at the shepherd. Its panting was ragged, labored, every breath a shallow struggle. The nurse appeared instantly, eyes darting from the girl's ashen face to the animal's injured flank. "Both of them need help," the clerk said quickly. The girl nodded frantically, hand tightening around the leash as if she feared someone would try to take him away. A wheelchair appeared, pushed by an orderly, but the girl shook her head. "Not without him," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, barely audible, but the nurse crouched to her level and held her gaze. "We'll take you together," the nurse said softly. "He stays with you." The girl's eyes filled with tears of relief, and she allowed herself to be guided into the chair, the dog pressing his side against her knees as though to anchor her. Two orderlies lifted the shepherd carefully onto a stretcher padded with towels, and when he whimpered, the girl leaned forward, whispering something to him only he could hear. They rolled down the hall in tandem, into a trauma bay lit by blinding surgical lamps. Voices quickened, gloves snapped, scissors sliced through fabric. The girl's torn jacket fell away, revealing a series of scrapes along her arms and shoulder, one wound bleeding steadily. She flinched as antiseptic touched the raw skin, but her eyes stayed fixed on the stretcher beside hers, where the shepherd lay panting, tongue lolling, blood soaking the towel under his leg. Veterinary staff were paged from the animal clinic across the street. They often coordinated with the hospital during accidents involving service animals or strays brought in alongside injured humans. Until they arrived, the ER team worked with the same urgency for both. 4 lines slid into veins, gauze pressed to wounds, monitors applied. The girl winced as a nurse cleaned gravel from her elbow, but her free hand stretched across the narrow gap, fingers brushing the shepherd's ear. His eyes fluttered, catching hers, and his tail gave one weak thump against the stretcher. Doctors asked questions, name, age, allergies, what had happened, but the words tumbled out disjointed. "A car had swerved on the street corner," she explained. Headlights too close, horn blaring. She had jumped back, but the dog had been struck along the leg, thrown sideways, dragging her down with him. She remembered the screech of brakes, the slam of her body onto pavement, then scrambling to gather him up even as her own skin burned from the fall. Somehow she had managed to half carry, half drag him the 3 blocks to the hospital entrance. Her voice cracked when she tried to explain more, so she stopped, clutching his fur as tears slipped down her face. The staff didn't press. Their hands moved quickly, bandages wrapping her shoulder, tetanus shot administered, IV fluids dripping into her vein. She barely noticed, her eyes locked on the other table where the shepherd's leg was cleaned. The matted blood washed away to reveal a deep gash and bone bruising. The attending vet arrived at last, pulling on gloves with brisk efficiency, murmuring that the dog would need stitches, but the bone appeared intact. The girl sagged with relief at the words, closing her eyes for a moment, gripping the edge of her bed until her knuckles whitened. Time blurred under the surgical lights. Sutures pulled skin neatly together on the shepherd's leg. Celine rinsed grit from the girl's wounds. Both were stabilized, wrapped, medicated, then left in the dimmer quiet of a recovery room side by side. The shepherd rested on a padded mat, IV clipped neatly to his paw, bandaged tight around his hind leg. The girl lay on her cot, shoulder-bound, elbow in a sling. She turned her head and found his gaze waiting. His ears flicked, tail thumped faintly, and she reached across the space, fingertips brushing his paw. Hours passed. The chaos of the ER drifted beyond their door, muffled by thick walls. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, adjusting fluids, smiling when they saw how the shepherd never let his gaze leave hers. She whispered to him through the night, voice soft, telling him stories from when she first found him as a stray outside the schoolyard, skinny and wary, how she had fed him bits of her lunch until he trusted her enough to follow her home. She told him about the times he had chased away strangers who frightened her, how he had slept at the foot of her bed every night since. The words tumbled out, a mix of gratitude and fear, as if saying them aloud would anchor him here with her, keep him from slipping away into the quiet beyond. By morning, the worst had passed. The shepherd lifted his head, licked her fingers, shifted slightly against the mat as though to move closer. The girl smiled through her exhaustion, tears streaking clean paths on her cheeks. She tried to sit, groaned at the ache in her shoulder, but the dog's eyes followed her every movement with steady devotion. Doctors entered, spoke in calm tones about recovery timelines, wound care, follow-up appointments. The girl nodded, though she only half heard them. What mattered was the warm weight of the shepherd's paw against her arm, the steady rhythm of his breathing, the undeniable bond that had carried them both through the worst night of their lives. When discharge papers came, the hospital bent rules. Normally, animals weren't kept in patient bays, but no one had the heart to separate them after what they had survived together. The dog was released from veterinary care at the same time as the girl, both bandaged, both leaning on each other as they hobbled toward the exit. Staff lined the hall to watch them go, some smiling, some misty-eyed, the unspoken recognition passing between them. They had witnessed a bond unbroken, a loyalty fierce enough to carry through blood and pain. The sliding doors opened again, this time spilling sunlight onto their faces. The air outside smelled of rain on asphalt, cool and sharp. The girl tightened her grip on the leash, and the shepherd pressed close against her side, limping but determined. Together they stepped into the day, scarred but alive, tethered by something stronger than words. Every step hurt. Her shoulder burned, his leg throbbed, but they moved as one, side by side down the sidewalk, each leaning into the other's strength. And though the world around them spun with traffic and strangers and noise, they felt only the silence of survival, the quiet triumph of still breathing, still standing, still together.